Good morning. Today is the first day of Kislev, Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the month, and it's also the 14th of November. We're at the third reading of Toldot, and here we have, it's quite short, and it's interesting that it's so short, and yet it tells us about the main aspect of Isaac's divine service. And so I'll read it for you. And it begins like this, that Isaac went and he was living in the place in the land of the Philistines, towards the south, actually towards Gaza. And the Philistines envied him. They blocked up all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of his father Abraham and filled them with earth. So this is the first part, that Abraham dug wells. Now we don't know exactly why he dug wells, but I've shared with you in the past that I think one of the best explanations is that Abraham was trying to create free commerce, and wells were needed in order for people to be able to travel from one place to another. Otherwise, when water was very costly, commerce was very hard. So that was one thing that Abraham did, but it wasn't his main, you understand, it wasn't his objective. It was a means to an end. And the end was, of course, to create more civilization. The Philistines blocked these wells. Now, the commercial reason why they would do this is because that way, if these free wells were blocked and filled with dirt and there was no way to access the water, so they could charge whatever exorbitant prices they wanted for the water that they had. But we're now going to go in a completely spiritual direction. What does it mean, and why would they block and fill these wells? So first of all, we have to start with the fact that for Isaac, digging wells is essential. It's not a means to an end. By him, digging the well is actually the service of God that he does, and the way it's explained is that digging a well is like what we do inside of ourselves when we come to serve God. We need to create what is called awakening from below. What is awakening from below? What does it look like? So it looks like the gushing water that comes up from the ground. In the same way, when a person is filled with love of God, it's almost like a feeling that he's overflowing, that something is coming, bursting out of him, and pushing him up, and pushing him to do more. When that happens, that's called an awakening from below, and it's met with an awakening from above by God. That is the way we describe Isaac's work. And by the way, this is the reason why the prophets and then the sages explain that in the time of Mashiach, at the end of days, we will identify with Isaac's type of work, with Isaac's type of divine service, much more than with the other two patriarchs' type of service. And again, it's because the awakening comes from below. The whole idea is that in our generation, you may have missed this, but I'm sure you'll identify with it right away. God doesn't call on us. It's seldom that a person feels that God is coming down to them. More often than not, the way that people awaken, the way that people create a relationship with God is that they awaken from below. So that is Isaac's type of work, and it's symbolized in the Torah by his digging wells until the water comes gushing up. Now, why did the Philistines, according to the more spiritual understanding, why did the Philistines block these wells that Abraham had made, not Isaac's? So the explanation given in Chassidus, I think, is just tremendous. The Philistines saw that Abraham was a successful person. Successful physically, materially, with his wealth, but also successful spiritually. And they tried to mimic his work. They tried to do the same thing. Now, if you mimic someone materially, you might have the same success. But if you try to fake what someone else is doing internally, their divine service, that doesn't work. And so they try to do the same motions. By the way, this is very common. A lot of people see a great Rebbe, a great teacher, and they're taken in by him, and they want to follow him. And then they begin to mimic him. They say, I'll do what he does. I'll dress like he dresses. I'll do what he does. I'll pray like he prays. I'll say... But it's empty. It's empty because it's inauthentic. Why is it inauthentic? Because you can't fake feelings. It doesn't work that way. Feelings have to be authentic. They have to be real. How does a true Rebbe work? Why does he find favor in God's eyes? Because exactly of the way that he approaches his relationship with God emotionally and in terms of his feelings. So, to be in a relationship that has life, you have to feel. That's what the Zohar says, that Torah and mitzvos, Torah and the performance of commandments, if they're missing love and fear of God, they're like a bird that doesn't have wings. They can't fly up. They get stuck. This is actually also the topic of the Tanya that we're reading in these days. What is it? Why is it that when you do something without feeling, it doesn't really go up? It doesn't really make an impression. It's the same thing with people. If I have a relationship with someone and I'm just making it as if I feel something towards them, but I don't really, then eventually it'll fall apart. The same thing is true with God. And when Abraham served God the way that he served, you could look at the external representation, the external behavior of his feelings, and you would try to mimic that, but you can't mimic the inside. And the inside comes from the relationship itself. And what does it mean? How do you develop this relationship? So the first piece of advice that's given in Hasidic thought is that whenever you're doing a mitzvah, certainly if you're praying, and certainly when you're saying a bracha, saying a blessing, the person should feel that God is in front of them. That's why the apex of prayer is the Amidah, where we say in each bracha, in each blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem. Blessed are you, God. What do you mean you? You is the second person pronoun. I'm talking as if God is in front of me. Now again, a person on the face of it can't picture what God is in front of them, but they can feel as if they're standing in the divine presence. They're standing before God. That itself awakens feeling in a way that nothing else can. There's other higher levels after that. But at the beginning, that's the first way to envision things so that they become real, they become true inside. So what happened? So the Philistines, they faked Abraham's behavior, and instead of the feelings coming up, because that's what a well is, the water comes up, they blocked the wells. They turned these things into empty, dry manners of conduct. And they don't really have anything. But again, this is true in any relationship. If the feelings are inauthentic, eventually the relationship falls apart. If a person doesn't feel anything and they say, I don't feel anything, at least they're being frank, they're being honest. But if you try to fake it, it doesn't really work. So you have to have a respect for the person in front of you to actually feel something and not just be empty and not just to be dry. Now, that's the first part of it. You can't fake the previous generation. You can't look at your Rebbe, you can't look at your teacher and say, I'll do the same thing and the same result, and I'll get the same results. It doesn't work that way. That's first of all. But Isaac then goes on to redig those wells. And not only does he redig those wells, it says that afterwards, he goes on to dig 3 more wells. The 3 other wells are called Esek, Sitna, and Rechovot. Esek means struggle, Sitna means hatred, and Rechovot means ample space. And the explanation is like this. Every generation, like in the patriarchs, each one of the patriarchs is a different path in serving God. So each of these generations had to forge their own path. They had to find their own way. It's explained in Chassidus that these three wells, they represent the three stages of finding your way. The first one is struggle. Struggle is not struggle with the outside. It's actually an inner struggle. It's the questioning, the ongoing questioning. Am I doing the right thing? If I'm starting something new, I have to at least have some self-doubt. Because your hand is always lower. You always have the lower hand if you're starting something new. To continue what already was in the previous generations is easiest. You can just go and do whatever was done before, and you know that that's okay. Again, you don't have to feel, you don't have to mimic them. You just continue the same process, what they were doing, continue their work, what they told you to do, and so on. But if you want to start something new, and here Isaac wants to start something new. To be able to start something new, you first of all have to have some self-doubt. Is the path that I'm taking really accepted by God? Is it really finding favor in God's eyes? The sign that you're off the path is if you have no doubts. If you have no doubts about your path, then it's probably not right at all. But if you have doubts, you start up with struggle, and then you come to a place where you're whole with yourself, and you say, yes, this is who I am, this is what I need to be doing. Then you move to the second stage, which is called hatred. Hatred means it's only after you're certain of your path do those who oppose you begin to show up. Then you begin to have opposition. It doesn't have to be people. It could be all kinds of things. And this opposition is something that Isaac then had to struggle with. And finally, he comes to a state called ample space. To get there, it says, Vayatek misham, that he moved on from there. But the word in Hebrew, Vayatek, is the same word as what we call the highest level of the crown, atik. It's called pleasure. Pleasure means that if you begin to find, even though there is opposition, you have tremendous pleasure in your divine service, then you will merit to come to a place of ample space where you will feel that suddenly everything is open before you. Those are the three stages. They're not for everyone. Not every person goes through this. Most people just continue on the path of their forefathers. But a lot of times that path, especially in this generation, has been locked, has been closed, because some generations did not keep the tradition, at least not at the same level. And when people come back as Balei Tshuva, in a certain sense, they really have to go through this process of first having self-doubt. Is this really what I need to be doing? Is this really who I am? But then if you begin to feel this feeling of there's opposition from the outside, maybe it's family, maybe it's friends, maybe it's work, whatever it is, you know you're on the right path. Finally, hopefully, you come to a state where you find pleasure in everything that you do. And that pleasure leads to a completely different feeling, one of ample space, that even when there's opposition, I'm still very whole with myself. I still feel there's a lot of room for what I'm doing, and I feel complete, and this is a path that I want to follow. So thank you for joining. If you wonder, I didn't do it justice. I'm sorry. As I was speaking, I knew that I was saying a few things, dropping a few things. Please read the article. I think the article is phenomenal. It's on. It'll be on Wonders. It's in Wonders and on Patreon, and you can look at it then. Patreon.com/Galeinai, GALEINAI. Thanks for joining. Hope to see you tomorrow.